Rather than why did this happen to me, the question is, why is this happening for me? I realized that I've been chasing fame and fortune through rock and roll and real estate when what I needed to be chasing was truth and mastery. Even if I was never rich, never famous, if all I got to do was get 1% better at entrepreneurship with every week that went by for the rest of my life, that would be a life well lived. As long as I am still here and I keep myself in the game, I can always build back. I am the number one asset, nothing else. The water may be very choppy and stormy, or it might be perfectly glass, very calm. But the depths of the ocean are always quiet, always dark, always calm. Okay, I'm willing to work like a maniac for 3 years, and in return, I expect to be financially free in 3 years. Very dangerous place to be. Very, very, it's setting ourselves up for failure. It might happen, but it might not.
Welcome to the Thought Leader Revolution with Nikki Ballou. Join the revolution. There's never been a better time in history to speak your truth, find your freedom, and make your fortune. Each week, we interview the world's top thought leaders and learn the secrets of how they built a 6 to 7 figure practice. This episode has been brought to you by eCircleacademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.
Welcome to another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. I'm your host, Nikki Ballou, and boy, do we have an exciting guest lined up for you today. Today's guest is a fellow Canadian. He is someone who has thought leadership in a very niche area. And yes, I said niche. We're Canadians. We say niche. We don't say niche. And I'll tell you, this dude failed 5 times at getting himself an assistant. And then he cracked the code. And since then, he has helped over 750 awesome entrepreneurs get the perfect assistant. And he has an industry-leading stick rate. That means more of the assistants stick around and do great work. I am speaking, of course, of none other than the one, the only, the legendary Tim Francis. Welcome to the show, Tim.
Great to be here, my man. Oh, Canada, what's up?
Hey. So, Tim, the men and women who listen to this show are society's greatest heroes outside the military. They are the entrepreneurs whose dreams, whose visions, whose passion makes the world a bigger, better, more awesome place. They listen to this show not because of me. I'm here every week. They're here for you. They want to learn about you. They want to learn from you. But before they can do that, they got to get to know you. Tell us your backstory. How'd you get to be the great Tim Francis?
Well, I appreciate that everyone on this call and listening to this is here for the pursuit of excellence. And one thing I realized early on was I would never fulfill my potential in this lifetime if I was stuck all day in my email inbox. So I was a pretty heavy duty real estate investor back in the day, and I was offering up to buy up to 100 houses a week. So it was a pretty ambitious project. I got caught up in the loss of the 2008 through 2010 real estate crash, lost $250,000, mostly of investor money, which is very painful. And I also, one of my mentors, in fact, my lead mentor, happened to be the main promoter of a $12 million Ponzi scheme, unbeknownst to me. It all came out in the wash. His business partner was convicted in court, given a $250,000 fine, barred from holding securities for 25 years. People lost their life savings. It was a wild time. There's a few other complicating things that were happening in my life around that time. Some I can't really talk about, just out of respect for those involved. And I developed an illness called erythema nodosum. Now, it's very rare. It's a stress-related illness. It started in my ankles. It started as a swelling that moved up to my knees, up to my hips. And in 5 days, from December 26, 2010 till New Year's Eve, December 31st, 2010, I went from being able to walk and stand and live my normal life to not being able to even bathe myself. It was a very shocking experience for a 28-year-old to go from former college athlete to being crippled like a 98-year-old. So I had to move back with my parents for full-time care, and there was no timeline for recovery. We didn't know if it would be a day, a week, a month, and there was no treatment. There was no drugs to take. There was no physical therapy to do. So I stared at the ceiling from a bed in my parents' home day in and day out. I felt embarrassed. I felt humiliated. I screwed up all the big projects I thought were going to help make me rich and famous. I was actually also a touring drummer right before all this happened. And my band broke up 20 minutes before going on stage at the Western Canadian Music Awards. So here I thought I was going to be rich and famous through rock and roll and real estate. And instead I was crippled and completely broke with no way to make money laying in bed. One of the lowest points was when I had to decide between my mother giving me a sponge bath in bed at age 28 or sit on a stool inside a shower. Day after day, I oscillated between feeling completely demoralized to feeling humiliated to feeling depressed to wondering how I'd ended up in this situation. There's one question that I think helped keep me sane and helped me avoid the darkest of dark thoughts. And that was a question of personal responsibility, saying, what did I do to create this situation? Rather than why did this happen to me, the question is, why is this happening for me? And that's a question that really carried me through. The people who really carried me through, Nikki, man, my parents, oh my word, I owe them everything. To this day, I say my parents, including obviously my grandparents, my whole family lineage, so my family, my coaches, including my varsity college coach when I played college volleyball, and then the coaches and mentors I've had since then. These three groups of people, I'm standing on their shoulders, and I want to make good on all that they have sown into me. There's one other powerful entity that plays a very important role here. And in February of 2011, so the second month of my recovery of laying in bed, staring at the ceiling, I felt this tingling in my body, and I felt the warmth, and I heard a voice. And the voice said, is this really what you want? And I don't know if a second went by or an hour went by. Time stood still. Then I heard another voice. It was small. It was distant. It was weak. But it was very clear. And it said, yes. And in that moment, a cascade of realizations flooded through my body. I realized that I've been chasing fame and fortune through rock and roll and real estate when what I needed to be chasing was truth and mastery. Even if I was never rich, never famous, if all I got to do was get 1% better at entrepreneurship with every week that went by for the rest of my life, that would be a life well lived. I was confronted in the moment after that I'd been trying to the process. Kind of like a big, beautiful oak tree. I wanted to build the big trunk and the beautiful canopy that was really impressive to everyone else, but I wasn't willing to put in the time and be patient to grow the roots. What a lot of people don't know is for as big of a canopy as on a big oak tree, there's an equally big root system that you can't see that's beneath the earth. And the problem, a big, beautiful oak tree with insufficient roots, is the second that a wind comes along, there's no roots to hold it in place, that whole thing fell over. And that's what happened to me. So I committed myself, instead of looking good, trying to win awards and have maximum revenue, to saying, how can I have the most solid foundation possible? And it was around that time, two really important quotes came across my life. One is, hell is meeting the man I could have been. Hell is meeting the man I could have been. And that quote to this day still sends chills up my spine. And around that time, I also came across a book by Cal Newport called Be So Good They Can't Ignore You. I was so hopped up on get rich, get famous, what's the hack to sneak my way through this, 4-hour work week this, rich dad, poor dad that, all the rest, get rich, get fast, get rich fast. And here, this book talked about kind of the opposite. How do I focus on getting so dang good, practice the craft, chip away every single day, that one day you'd be so good that any opportunity you wanted would be knocking on my door. Now, along the way, in this consciousness of hell is meeting the man I could have been, I realized I was never going to fulfill that potential if I was stuck doing mundane work day in and day out. And when I thought about it, I'd already failed 5 times at getting an assistant. And this is when I had a massive epiphany. I was standing in the shower thinking about my fifth failed assistant, realizing that my time and my attention were the most important asset that I had. Because here, Nikki, every single one of my greatest fears had come true. I'd lost the money, I'd lost the houses, I'd lost the reputation, I'd lost the investors, I'd lost the ability to walk, I'd lost everything. But you know what, Nikki? I was still here. I was like, I'm kind of tough to kill. As long as I am still here and I keep myself in the game, I can always build back. I am the number one asset, nothing else. And immediately after that, I realized I've been thinking about this wrong the whole time. I've been taking, if you will, kind of like a dating approach of, if someone's kind of good enough to go on a date, of course, this is a metaphor, then maybe I'll bring them on as an assistant. But guess what? That half-hearted approach was leading to half-hearted results. I'm trying to hire people overseas for a few bucks an hour. I only want to do a few hours a week. I'm real nervous about really committing any time into them. So this is where I am when I have the shower thought. And I can't tell you that this had to be divine intervention once again, Nikki. This question floats into my brain.
Do you believe in God?
I believe in a higher power, absolutely. Yeah, I believe in a higher power, absolutely. I don't know about the various, let's say, religious persuasions. I would call myself spiritual, not religious. I think religiosity and spirituality are two different things. So I get this download. The question is, if I was legally bound to being with my next assistant for 3 years, I was not allowed to fire them. I was not allowed to reassign them. I had to keep this next assistant for 3 years. What would I do differently? And suddenly everything changed. Well, I probably wouldn't hire the first person who applies. I'd probably generate dozens of candidates. I'd probably not hire overseas. I probably would pay fair market rates. List of 20 to 30 ways I would approach this differently. Then I felt guilty because this is kind of a negative question. It's like, I'm stuck with this assistant. So I said, how can I flip that around? I said, okay, what if I get to be with this next assistant for 3 years? It goes really well. We, perfect culture match in terms of business culture. We have a great time. They pick it up quickly. We enjoy working together. I said, well, if I knew that was going to happen, I would do a great job onboarding them. I'd be a generous coach. I'd be excited to train them. I would never miss a weekly alignment meeting with them. I'd be responsive to their messages on Slack or whatever, right? And so, Nikki, I push back from my desk and I look at these 2 lists of 20 to 30 items and I burst out laughing because I hadn't done a dang thing from either of these 2 lists with any of my first 5 assistants. So off I went. I generated 200 candidates, put them through my new hiring funnel, hired domestically, made them a direct hire into my company, hired someone who wanted to be an assistant, not someone who was just kind of trying it out, not a mentee, not a freelancer. And I ended up with this assistant named Sarah, who's a former paralegal from Kokomo, Indiana. And she starts with taking just 3 simple tasks off my plate: uploading blog posts, uploading podcasts, and sending invoices on my behalf. She did such a good job and won my trust at that level that quickly I delegated 3 more tasks and 3 more tasks and 3 more tasks. Before I knew it, she was taking over half of what I used to do. Within 1 year, she'd taken over my email inbox and my calendar. My income went from, I think it was like something like $28,000. It was like just above the poverty line, to $72,000. The next year, I think was $144. Next year, I think was $280. Then it was like $450 and $650 or something like that. In the first 5 years, I basically went from just above the poverty line to $650,000 a year in revenue. All from us following this this delegation cycle where I would define what I wanted done, then I would design how I wanted it done, and I would delegate it. Define, design, delegate over and over and over again. And I look back, I had no breathing room, 0, not financially, not emotionally, not psychologically. It was terrifying to get a North American assistant and make a long-term commitment like that. But it actually was the unlock. And ever since then, we've helped 750 other entrepreneurs have the exact same experience. So that's where I'm coming from today.
That's a hell of a story. But I'm gonna dig in a little bit. So you say you believe in a higher power, but you're spiritual, not religious. I'm going to push back because I said that for many, many years. And then I realized that was all bullshit. You either believe in a God or you don't. You either and you don't need to believe in someone's religion or the religion you grew up in, but either there is a God or there isn't. And if there is a God, then you believe in him. And if there isn't a God, then you don't. And a lot of what you shared and revealed in your monologue, it was riveting. But someone spoke to you. That person wasn't you, unless you're nuts and you made all this up, right? And I don't think you're nuts. You don't strike me as nuts, you know. So I'm going to ask you again, do you believe in God? Did God speak to you? Because you did not come up with these answers yourself.
Maybe
you were not lying in bed and you did not come up with, I think I should do this.
Right. Yeah, but maybe I'm nuts for saying yes to coming on your show.
Yeah.
I'm just having
Nicky
fun.
Billou is an old school man, brother. And I'm Canadian, but I was born in Iran, man. I wasn't born here, and I am not polite, nice Canadian. I'm kick your ass and in your face Canadian. So I'm like, we're on the ice and you're on the other team. You're about to get your block knocked off, brother.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Yeah.
I call it God. I do call it God. I believe in it. I understand some folks want to call it Krishna, or they want to call it, some other deity name. And I don't mean to exclude anyone from really feeling like the lessons that are here are accessible to them. So higher
brother,
power, universe,
anybody
God,
who feels excluded because you use the word God is an idiot. I'm sorry. They're an idiot and they should be excluded. Get the fuck out of here. I don't normally swear on this podcast. It's a clean podcast, and stay gone. Like, you had an experience. Listen, we had a nice conversation last week when our mutual friend Cheryl introduced us, and I wanted to meet you. I wanted to get to know you better. I enjoyed the cut of your jib and all of that. But dude, you pulled me in when you said to me and to everyone else who's going to hear this, you were lying in bed and you heard a voice. Man, I was listening to you carefully, but when you said that, I just leaned in, metaphorically, energetically speaking. I'm like, really? I want to know more. I want to hear more. Because in my life, there have been 4 instances where God directly spoke to me. And each and every single one of those instances was profoundly transformational to my existence on this planet. Wow. And it sounds to me like that was the case for you in this instance. Am I wrong?
There's a really, really beautiful quote from the Bhagavad Gita. And it says, "To the work you are entitled, but not the fruits thereof."
Yeah, you're entitled to your labor. You're not entitled to the fruits thereof. Yeah. I've heard that quote before. Steve Pressfield said it when he wrote the War of Art.
Right, and he's quoting ancient Sanskrit that is like, I think it's 2000 BC, before the Bible was even written, or at least the New Testament. So there's something to be said. There's something to be said, Nicky, about here's the mountain that I think I want to go after. And there's this great expression. I wish I could remember who said this, because I love to give attribution. So I don't know if you can add it to the show notes or something like that, or maybe someone can Google it. The expression, Nicky, is act like it all depends on you. Pray like it all depends on God.
God. Yeah. It's good.
And the Lord does not know the sincerity of how badly I want something unless I put my back into it. And one of my spiritual teachers, his name is Dr. David Wolf. He once taught me the difference between urgency and anxiety. It's possible to be urgent and excited, urgent and curious. I don't have to be urgent and anxious. We oftentimes as humans confuse the two. And I think it is a divine spiritual principle to be urgent. Maybe not anxious, but urgent, because there are only so many hours in the day, and there are only so many years in a life. And, everyone who's older than me says, man, it just goes faster and faster.
It does.
So to me, I want to wake up every single day and honor that spiritual breath of life that's been given to me. Because Nikki, if we were to draw on a piece of paper a line down the middle, and on one half of the page we write down all the things that will be crushed by time, you can write down businesses, homes, bank accounts, nations. Give it enough time, Canada will be gone. I mean, maybe thousands of years, but it's probably going to be gone. United States gone. Probably planet Earth, given tens of thousands of years, it'll probably be gone at some point. Sooner or later, almost everything is crushed by time. But you know what is not crushed by time is spiritual principle, spiritual, timeless truth. And I believe urgency. I believe being of service. These are some of the only things that will not be crushed by time. And if I align myself to my consciousness being in those divine elements that will not be crushed by time, that is divine service.
Yeah, 100%. Tim, it's my belief that when the Almighty speaks to you and gives you a message, you better listen. It's not wise to ignore that message when it's that direct. And in my experience, when I was spoken to, it was really clear, both through the voice I heard and the energy that God put into my body through me to get my attention, to do a particular thing, to look in a particular direction that day, that I had to do it. And I'm just wondering, when God spoke with you, what was that experience like for you? What did you feel compelled to do?
Nikki, I'm gonna go to the ancient Vedas again here on this one. There's three modes of nature: sattva, rajas, and tamas. The very Western washed and whitewashed version of that is be, do, have.
Yeah, be, do.
I am really not giving this topic the full gravity it's due, because I'm like way oversimplifying this, but it's three ways that we can go through life. And a very Western way is to say, if I just have the car or the money, then I can do things like drive down the street and feel fancy, and then I'll be happy, satisfied, fulfilled. Another Western way to go through life is do, have, be. If I just do 10 real estate deals, then I'll have $10,000 a month in passive income or something, and then I'll be happy, satisfied, and fulfilled. A third way, which is not very Western, at least by pop culture standards, is to say I'm going to be, do, have. And I'm going to be happy, fulfilled, and satisfied first. And then out of that, I'm just naturally going to do the things that a happy, fulfilled, and satisfied person is going to do. And then by extension of that, some things are going to come into my life that I'm going to have, right? And so, Nikki, I don't think that it was a particular doing or having. It was actually a moment of profound peace and quiet, like touching the bottom of the ocean. In transcendental meditation, the metaphor is often made that on the surface of the water may be very choppy and stormy, or it might be perfectly glass, very calm. So the surface of the water, who knows? Could be wild, could be calm. But the depths of the ocean are always quiet, always dark, always calm. And whether it's in a profound moment like we're talking about here, your 4 moments of life where God spoke to you, my like at least one moment of life where God spoke to me, or whether it's a more, let's say, more superficial moment where maybe I have a disagreement with someone, or there's a loss in the family or something. When I know every time I hit that moment of what is the spiritual eternal truth in the moment, suddenly everything is so quiet. I know I've touched spirit, and I know I've touched the bottom of the ocean. metaphorically speaking. So in that moment, Nikki, there was a peace and quiet I hadn't known maybe for decades at that point. And I would also say there was a quiet knowing that my ego had to die.
Yes.
And to be replaced with, I don't know if it's the loincloth or the crown or the whatever of humility, that I would be a humble servant serving my parents, the divine, and my coaches for the extraordinary gifts they've given me, that I make good on those and not waste a single day. And Nikki, I cannot tell you how much that perspective has liberated me. If we all had a 10% view into what could be in the future of our lives, not 50%, not 100%. Even if we just got 10% connected with what is possible in the future of our lives, I know for me, suddenly all my past pains and hurts and enemies and frustrations and disappointments and humiliations suddenly become very, very small. We have no idea what God can help us be, do, and have in any 1 year, 5 years. We have and especially this day and age, Nikki, there has never been a better time in humanity to be alive than right now. The amount that technology helps us, the amount that we can be connected to anything and everyone that we need. Does it mean that it's a time without pain and suffering? No. There's a lot of difficulty in the world right now. There's a lot of complexity and dangerous, volatile, uncertain, confusing, and ambiguous. VUCA, that's it. Yeah, VUCA, that's it.
My last guest talked about VUCA.
Yeah. And here's the thing, Nikki, even if there was a better time to be alive, that's just not where we are. This is it. And I think that's one thing that really rocked my world, going all the way back to 2011 when I was recovering, was suddenly I realized that quote that's like, are you willing to work for 3 to 5 years so that you can have a life like few ever will? Like, work like few are willing to, so you can have a life few ever will. That, that's like repeated over and over again in the get rich literature. It's right. Like, bust your ass for 3 years and then, you've got to be
marketing. Yeah, for sure. Talks that.
And real estate investing and Bitcoin speculating and right.
Yeah.
And the thing is to the work you are entitled, but not the fruits thereof. Nikki, I did everything my real estate investing mentors told me, but you know what? I just happened to step into the game at the exact wrong time. I got my degree from University of Alberta in 2006. By 2007 and 8, I'm making offering to buy 100 houses a week. There could not have been a worse time in the history of real estate to be that aggressive. I was inexperienced. I had a great work ethic. Unfortunately, I was the ant on the elephant's back. I was taking a few ant-sized steps to the east, but the elephant wanted to walk 2 elephant-sized strides to the west. And so I was going west with, no matter my intent, no matter my character, no matter my intelligence, no matter the training I'd received. Sometimes life just does not work out the way that we hope, despite our best intentions and efforts. And I think is it the Buddha that says attachment is the root of all suffering. And so if I'm attached to, okay, I'm willing to work like a maniac for 3 years, and in return, I expect to be financially free in 3 years, or I expect to be winning this award or this whatever, very dangerous place to be. Very, very, it's setting ourselves up for failure. It might happen, but it might not. And if we're heartbroken at the end of that, rather than a humble student, we're putting ourselves in dicey waters.
Well, Be Do Have is something that I first came across when I read the works of Louise Hay.
Okay.
You Can Heal Your Life was a book she wrote in the mid 80s. And then she, of course, is the founder of Hay House Publishing, which has published some of the biggest names in self-development and self-help. And this was her thing, because she is a woman who created cancer in her own body. And she created it by really going through life unconsciously and hating herself. And the cancer that she created would have killed her. And she realized that she needed to look at it differently. So she looked at it as something that was happening for her, not to her. And that's when, in the mid-'80s, she started to popularize the concept of Be Do Have. You Can Heal Your Life sold millions and millions of copies when it was published in 1986. But then in 2001, I did the Landmark Forum.
Yeah.
And Landmark really deeply goes into the Be Do Have philosophy of life. And I not only did the Landmark Forum, I went deep through the curriculum for living. I became a Landmark introduction leader for 2.5 years. I got married to someone I met in that program. We had a couple of children together. And I was very much involved in the Landmark work continuously from 2001 to 2012. 11 years straight. And Be Do Have is very powerful. And it's something that I'll be candid, I've had trouble living from there because I've been a doer more than I've been a beer, you know? And listening to you share that right now just reminded me, yeah, right now, what do I need to focus on? I need to focus on mastery and truth in a few areas. So I'm doing that with my health. I'm 57 years old. I just did a bodybuilding competition. I came in third place. The guys who I competed against were all 20 years younger than I was. So, you know, I'm happy with the way that I've been transforming and recreating my body, my health, my level of leanness. And what it showed me is I never thought at this age, at 57, I could look like that. But now I see that I can. In the process, who I've become that's produced this result, this having, that's what's been important. And it's important to apply this to how I'm doing business, to my podcast interviews, to my relationship with my woman, to my fathering of my sons. And I appreciate you revealing this here because it's been personally valuable for me to hear this today at this time. I think what people don't get, they tell me, hey, listen, what's the best thing about you hosting this podcast and having all these unbelievable guests? And I've had some unbelievable guests. And I say, I'll let you know a little secret. The best part about it is it's like I get some free coaching every time I'm on a show. And you laugh, but I'm dead serious. I want that. That's one reason I wanted to speak to you. Like, look, Cheryl's your friend. She's my friend. She said, I think you'll like having Tim on your show. So I was pretty sure I was going to have you on the show. But I wanted to make sure, am I going to learn something from this man? Because if he's got nothing to teach me, then that's not interesting to me. But if he's got something to teach me, then hell yeah, I'll have him on, right? Hell yeah, I'll have him on. And today, I've been a guest on 2 shows, and I've interviewed 3 other people before you on my own show. In each instance, I learned something. And to me, I think that's super important, is that I learned something. And I'm going to approach each day going forward saying, how do I get one step closer to truth and mastery in whatever it is that I'm tackling right now? I just wrote a book with Mark von Musser. I told you about Mark. Mark and I are good friends. And I uploaded it into Kindle Select Publishing, which is owned by Amazon. Book's coming out next Monday. It's going to be my 11th published book. I'm excited. And there's another book that I've written, which I need to extensively revise, and it's going to be a co-authored book. That needs to be ready within a month to come out before the November election. It's very important that it comes out a month before the November election at the latest. So, mastery for me in truth is, can I do this? Yes, I can do this. Mastery is, how do I become a good enough writer and storyteller to make the changes in this book, in this novel that I need to make and have it out on time? That's a good question. That's a really good question. I don't know the answer, but I know the process of going through the work is going to give me the answer. And I'm enjoying our conversation because everything you're saying is teaching me something. And I hope that anyone listening to this is having the same experience.
May I offer something to you, Nikki?
Go for it.
So Louise Hay popularizes to Western audiences the idea of be do have. She's pulling on ancient Sanskrit writings, including in the Bhagavad Gita. Being is what's known as sattva. Sattva. There's sattva, rajas, and tamas. Okay, so sattva is being. Sattva, though, is actually not just saying, who am I going to be? Make no mistake. If you said, how can I be in truth and mastery? Or how can I be loving, passionate? How can I be thoughtful? How can I be considerate? Even if that's all you took from the idea of sattva, I guarantee your satisfaction with life will go up. Like there's just no question. Like when I ask myself, how can I be flexible, considerate, generous, even to my enemies, even with the person I'm on hold with at the bank, you know what I mean? Which is not the most fun situation. Here's the thing. On the surface, is it a waste of time for me to be bounced to the 7 representative at the airline to adjust the flight? Yeah, it's a real waste of my time. But here's the thing. If I remain in, I would say this, to the extent I can remain in sattva, and Nikki, my human shortcomings get in the way every day. So I'm not sitting here saying I've mastered. I am, however, saying I'm in the process of pursuing mastery. And that will be a life. I'm never going to arrive. Okay. To the extent that I can water the root of the tree of life through sattva, to the extent that I can do that, I'm actually watering the root. If a person is living and doing and having, it's like watering the apples on the end of the tree. And I'm going to guess your experience is watering the apples does not necessarily produce more apples. But if I water the root of the apple tree, I might feed a family for generations. And watering the root of the tree is to be focused on the being. And so even if the doing is I'm on hold for the 7th rep in a row with the bank or the airline, even if that's the doing, I can still water the root of the tree by being in being. And here's a bit of an invitation for you, Nikki. Part of sattva, I'm going to read you a few qualities. To be sattvic is to be bold. I think you have that in spades. To be confident, to be considerate, to be secure, to be empathetic, to be straightforward, to be honest, to be courageous, to be open. That's all sattvic. Here's the thing, though, and this is something that I think a lot of folks, especially in modern media, are maybe a little conflated on. To be rajasic, which is doing. Rajasic qualities include being abrasive, cocky, harsh, bully, arrogant, insensitive, loud, obnoxious, selfish. To be tamasic, which is having, is to be scared, insecure, nervous, inhibited, anxious, self-deprecating, weak, fragile, indecisive. Okay? So I think it's actually not that hard to be straightforward and loud. The problem with that is that's a mix of sattva and rajas. If I can find a way to be both straightforward and sensitive straightforward without being loud or obnoxious. My view is the same power can come through, the same clarity and security and weight of message can still come through. However, I'm now infinitely more digestible to a far wider range of people. And as such, if we go into psychology, the human brain can only be in the prefrontal cortex, where creativity and collaboration, executive functioning happens. It can only be there, or the amygdala, which is fight, flight, freeze. Some people say fawn, right? If I'm fawning over someone, right? My brain can only be in one or the other. It can't be both in the same time. That's like a psychological, anatomical, physiological phenomenon. It's one or the other. If I'm in Banff National Park being chased by a grizzly bear, it's real tough to be thinking about, like, how can I solve my latest business problem? It's one or the other. Okay. Yeah. So how can I solve big problems for and with others if I'm perpetually putting them into fight or flight by me being loud, obnoxious, or a bully or harsh or something like that? My effectiveness is just very limited if I'm in that space. And Nikki, I am someone who can definitely fall into being critical. If I'm upset or I'm tired or something, I get critical of others, and guess how effective I am? Zero. In fact, it's negative. It's like stepping backwards in that relationship. And so a great challenge and growth point for me, and I invite you to look at this as well, is to say, how can we be Satvik through and through? Yes, still be bold. Yes, still be confident. Yes, still be straightforward. I think sometimes as a Canadian, probably, I struggle a little with being straightforward. Canadians are so used to being polite and kind of maybe beating.
Oh God, yeah.
I know that probably bothers you to no end, right? And rightfully so. Yeah. To be straightforward is just so much. It just feels right. However, it's not enough to be straightforward for me if I'm also being loud, obnoxious, insensitive, arrogant, something like that. So how can I be straightforward while still being secure, courageous, honest, considerate? It's a tricky one. And I roll out that invitation to you in your coming kind of days, weeks, months, and years.
Well, it's interesting. See, this is a different direction than I would normally take on this podcast, but I'm going to take it for a moment.
Okay.
I believe that today, August 19th, 2024 is the date you and I are doing this episode. It's probably going to come out in September at some point, but we're living in a time where, let's be candid, there's some dark forces out there that are looking to reshape some of the great qualities of Western civilization, right?
Okay.
Which has been liberty, openness, a tolerance of all kinds of other ideas in peoples. And I tell you, as a man who was born in the Middle East, in Iran, this is a very unique and special aspect of Western civilization. And these dark forces are hiding under, behind the mantle of being tolerant and inclusive, and that's why that word sets me off to no end. But they're anything but that. They are actually fascists, in my view, and they are hiding behind that Mussolini, Adolf Hitler style fascism, and they're attempting to shut people down. Now, I'm a student of history. If you go study Italy in the post-World War I era until Benito Mussolini took power, and you study Germany in the 20s and 30s until the time the Nazis took power, the tactics of the fascists and the Nazis were identical to those of the modern left today, identical to groups like BLM, to Antifa, to the so-called Liberal Party in Canada and the so-called Democrat Party in the US, because there was a time when I would agree those were liberal and Democrat parties. I don't believe that's the case today anymore. And I say this with a heavy heart because I come from a country where being opposed to a party could get you killed. And we came here to get away from all that. And what I'm very concerned about is that those forces are attempting to shut all of that down here. And I see myself as not just a champion for good in the world of business, but I'm one of those men born in tyranny that's here to sound the alarm for the native-born Canadian and American who doesn't believe it could happen here, to let them know it's happening here. Wake the fudge up. You know what I mean?
So you're feeling alarmed. You're feeling like
beyond
alarmed. Yeah,
beyond
terrified.
Alarmed.
Yeah, you're feeling terrified.
Terrified is a good word for it. For it. Because I think in 10 years, if we don't turn this around, you won't recognize Canada, you won't recognize the United States. Certain opinions are going to get you thrown in jail and even killed. That's what I believe is we're on our way to do it. And am I going to be a nice guy when I speak about those things? Am I going to be trying to be calm and sensitive? Honestly, no. I'm going to don some armor and I'm going to go to war, metaphorically speaking. I'm going after those guys, metaphorically speaking, and I'm going to fight to defeat them. And I will be nasty, abrasive, harsh, tough on them if I need to be. It's not the way I want to go forward in life, but I'm not going to have somebody, for example, who disagrees with me, falsely accuse me of things like racism, and sit there and take it. You know what I mean? It was a joke for me. It was a joke for me during COVID because I was one of the people who was saying these lockdowns are a step toward tyranny and fascism. And some, white bread Canadians called me a racist. And I'm going, you realize that I actually escaped racial persecution in Iran, right? That my family was 2 steps ahead of being killed for who we were. White boy. And I said it like that way to him. White boy, you realize that, right? You're just spouting crap to try to shut me up, but it's not going to work. And I'm here to tell you, in day-to-day life, I wholeheartedly buy into what you're saying about Sattva and not coming from being abrasive or harsh or bullying and cocky. But in the battle for ideas against a nasty, bullying enemy, I don't know that I'm going to stay there and not fight back, not punch back. In fact, I'm going to tell you, I am going to fight back and I'm going to punch back. And not that this podcast isn't about this. This is not the conversation I normally have here. But I'm very much torn between being this way in my personal and business life versus being the way I think I need to be to fight and defeat the forces of modern fascism.
So you're like, it sounds like, if I'm understanding you correctly, that you feel like there's almost kind of like an XY axis, if you will.
Yep.
Where it's kind of like, maybe on the X axis, it's like you've got how you speak to your loved ones, and then maybe how you speak to your business partners. And that's kind of one part of the X axis. And then there's kind of like your public service, your public, word, the Nikki Ballou public service announcement on, what you're seeing in the big wide world. And if that's on the X axis and we kind of have different buckets, it sounds like on the Y axis, it's kind of like, what's the level of urgency? Because if it's like, hey, someone is maybe playing with fire, they're sparking a lighter or something, and it's, maybe like 100 feet away from a pile of hay, maybe we've got the space to be gentle and to be patient and to be whatnot. But if they're standing next to it, we're probably a little more anxious and a little more harsh to say, don't do that. You're going to set yourself on fire here. And then if the building is already burning and there's a gas tanker like 6 feet away, and next to that is 65 pounds of TNT, you're not even going to ask for permission. You're going to like grab that person by the throat and pull them out of there. And in your mind, that is your version of service in that instance because of the circumstances. Yeah. And it sounds to me like you're like, this is not an intellectual musing. You're like, I have been there running with the Iranian version of the gazpacho or whatnot, coming after you. This is not fiction. And it sounds, if I'm hearing you correctly, like you're like, yo, history repeats itself.
And it is right now.
Yeah. Yeah. And all of that is very, like, that's what's causing perhaps you to feel like, hey, this is not a time to be quiet or mild-mannered or to be equivocal. You know, for you, this is 5-bell alarm emergency. The house is burning and about to collapse on us. We need to yell and scream and get the F out.
We're pretty close to that. I wouldn't say we're quite there, but we're getting there. We're getting there sooner than I would like, a lot sooner. Like I said, it's under a 10-year journey, in my opinion.
Did you say 110 year or 10 year?
Under a 10-year journey. Like
under a 10-year journey. Okay.
So
yes.
Sometime between 2030 and 2034, we've either defeated these ideas and forces, or we've gone full fascist.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I guess my curiosity is, if you were to, first of all, just to be concrete about things, I guess you said there are certain dark forces. What are those forces in your opinion?
That's a really long conversation that, is beyond the scope of what I would want to do today, but I'm happy to. There's another podcast I have. I'm happy to bring you on that, and we can go deep into that. But in a nutshell, throughout human history, there have been people that want to be in power. They want to be in charge, and they would rather rule over the ashes than not rule over a thriving, prosperous society. And look at the Nazis. That's what they did. They destroyed Germany, and they destroyed all of Europe in order to do that. The fascists in Italy weren't quite as ruthless as that, but they were pretty ruthless. They sided with the Nazis when the Nazis went forward and did that. And right now, to me, that's what's happening in most of the Western world. Like in the United Kingdom, a judge handed down a 20-month sentence to a young man for posting on a Facebook group that he was opposed to migrants coming into the UK from other countries. They called him a racist, and they said, you're going to go to jail for 20 months. He pled guilty. If he hadn't pled guilty, the sentence would have been closer to 10 years. For posting on Facebook his political opinion, which in a Western country, we've always taken for granted that is our right to have whatever opinion we want without having the dead hand of the state tell us what's approved and what's not approved. And, brother, all I can say to you is, again, let's move back to the business conversation after I say this, is that's the reason that I'm a little abrasive right now. I'm a little harsh.
Sure.
And I make sure that in my personal life, in my business life, in my speaking to the world of success life, I'm not that way. But in the political world, in the arena, I am that way. Like, to me as a Canadian, it's very important that I do everything in my power to make sure that the Liberal NDP government is defeated. Everything in my power. Everything. Because they passed a law trying to make Canada like the UK. Holy crap. I don't want to be arrested for something I wrote on Facebook. I don't want to have to spend 20 years in jail. So that's that.
If you ever want to text me the answer to this next question, if at all, maybe you never want to even answer this question or share your thoughts. And it's one, Nikki, I don't even have an answer to, but I wanted to float your way. I don't know why. I'm just getting this nudge to kind of to entertain this. When I was sick, I couldn't walk for those 3 months. I was forced to learn some business truths that I actually had read in books before, but until I went through it, I did not have the embodied experience to actually understand it and actually take it seriously. Like, for example, in time of extreme crisis, the 3 things I need to do: number 1, make sure my mental health is taken care of. Do I need to exercise? Yep. Do I need to meditate? Do I need to talk to a therapist? All the above plus more, right?
Yeah, because remember, I agree with that.
I'm the number 1 asset. You're the number 1 asset in your life. 100%, right? Okay. So that's step 1. Step number 2, I need to cut expenses to the absolute bone, and probably whatever expenses I think are there and on whatever timeline I think I need to do it on, I probably didn't cut deep enough, and I probably didn't do it fast enough. Okay. So that's the second step. The third step, do something called a cash flow forecast. Simple spreadsheet, number out the next 13 weeks. What are the cash inflows and cash outflows? And I don't even necessarily mean revenue from my business operations. Cash inflow could be from like selling a laptop I'm not using anymore. It could be a loan from a family member. Like it could, like literally any form of cash inflow and any form of cash outflow. Getting that 13-week view, and then from there building an ABC plan, as is versus bad versus catastrophe. If the cash doesn't come in or some other curveball comes, what am I going to do? Right. Now I realized all of that, Nikki, all the way back in 2011 when I was going through this dark time, $250,000 in debt, no way to make money, laid up in bed. Little did I know, Nikki, from a divine design perspective, I knew that I wanted to be a source of truth to the masses of entrepreneurship on what building a real business actually looks like, not the Lamborghinis and bikinis version of that.
Yeah, that's BS. That's not even real.
And I've known that I wanted to have that level of impact for entrepreneurs for decades. I've known that. Like I'm 41 now. I knew that at probably 28, 27, sometimes like right before this illness hit. And I said to God, this is the contribution I want to make. And to this day, Nikki, I still have that exact same desire deep in my heart. It burns every day. And I think God looked at me and said, okay, here's the curriculum. And I had to go through that extremely painful experience to be forged through the fires to have certain insights. And Nikki, wouldn't you know it? That 3 steps that I learned in 2011, the very, very hard way, put me in a position 9 years later when the pandemic hit and so much of society shut down and entrepreneurs are in total crisis. Yeah. I was one of the few people. And I volunteered my time. I waived my speaking fee to speak on countless podcasts and stages. Did the same. And I just said, I've been here before. Details were different. Principles were the same. Here's the 3 things you got to do. Nikki, the number of people that called me, wrote me, texted me, emailed me that in tears and said, I did the 3 things that you said. It's not looking good, Tim. But you know what's worse than bad news is no news in a moment of crisis. Being completely disoriented, no idea if the ship's going up or down and what's coming next. And Nikki, there's no way I could have helped bring peace and sanity and clarity and healing for thousands of entrepreneurs in 2020 had I not had that experience in 2011. And, like Steve Jobs said in his famous Stanford commencement speech, we oftentimes can't connect the dots in life.
Looking forward. You can only look looking backward. Yeah.
So bringing this all the way back, Nikki, this is my question, and maybe there's no one answer. In what way is what is happening in the world today? And I don't know. In what way is there divine design in what's happening? And why does this need to be happening right now? What's the growth and the expansion? I'm curious, maybe now or later.
Like I said, this is not a political podcast, but I guess it's become one today. Look, I know my role. During the pandemic, like you, I waived all my fees and I spoke. I put on events out of my own pocket to inspire thousands of people. I hired Mark Victor Hansen from Chicken Soup for the Soul, Candace Owens, a whole bunch of other people. I spent tens of thousands of dollars to inspire people that were feeling defeated. And I waived my fees. There were people who needed coaching, couldn't afford to pay it. I didn't charge them. I bought food for people, a whole bit. So, and I'm 57 years old. I've been through a lot of shit in my life. Sure. And I think I know what God's mission for me is. It's to be a warrior and a bold stand for freedom. And entrepreneurs are at the head of the list of people I'm here to serve and fight for. Wow. And why is God doing this right now? you're going to have to ask him. I can tell you my own take on it is that there are aspects of humanity that have forgotten about God, that have forgotten to honor God, and have really behaved in a way that God is trying to wake them up. That's what I believe. There's a lot of people who think, there's no such thing as evil in the world. And I think the greatest trick the devil has played on all of us is convincing us that he doesn't exist and that evil doesn't exist. But there's plenty of evil in the world. There's plenty of evil in the world. I mean, if you look at the carpet bombing of hospitals in places like Ukraine, the terrorists that attacked Israel and went into the kibbutzes and threw babies up in the air and caught them on a bayonet spit and raped preteen girls. I mean, come on. That is a clear example that there's evil out there in the world. Part of my job is to be one of those folks who's going to stand up and say, hey, let's stand up for what's right. Let's stand up for what's good. Let's band as many good men and women together to preserve the legacy of goodness that our ancestors and God Almighty has bequeathed on us. And hopefully myself and others like me will be able to get enough people to take that stand that will get to preserve our way of life. And the entrepreneurs are going to have to be at the head of that fight because, the entrepreneurs are the ones that are going to create a better, juster society with the energy and passion that they bring to their visions. That's why, like you, I'm somebody who believes I've been sent here to have an impact on entrepreneurs, to stand up for them, to say entrepreneurship is good, freedom is good, capitalism is good. I wrote a children's book, brother, years ago. And I don't know if you can read this. It might be too shiny, but it's Kathy Capitalist and Johnny Jobmaker. This is a children's book teaching them about capitalist principles, why capitalism is good, why making jobs is good, and to me, it's important to constantly be bringing that message out. So there you have it.
I appreciate you sharing what's on your heart and appreciating you sharing why you think you're here and what you think your role is. I appreciate getting to know you better. Thank you for sharing that.
Well, I appreciate getting to know you better. So, Tim, circling back to business, what you did for yourself can be a blueprint for a lot of people wanting to take the next level, leap forward in entrepreneurship. You will have a real business when there are a few elements in your business. Number one is predictable sales, revenue, and a predictable group of people that need what you have to offer and are willing to buy from you. Number two is that the business is more than you. The business includes other people that need to be a part of it in order for you to be able to maximize the impact that you will have through the business. And I think the very first person you ought to hire ought to be an assistant to lighten your load in some respects so that you can increase your load in the respects that lean into your greatest talents. So I think what you do is very important from that perspective. I'm wondering if you could, for a moment, explain why that's important to my listener, and then let people know how they can get a hold of you if they want to explore how to do this for themselves.
When I was a little while ago, I was curious. What would Indiana Jones's resume be? So I'm on Google, I'm on ChatGPT, and it turns out that this guy has like a PhD in archaeology, a master's level knowledge of history, a bachelor's level knowledge of engineering, booby traps and whatnot. Then he also has hand-to-hand combat skills, marksmanship skills, whip skills, orienteering, survival, how do we live in the wild, orienteer is all of it, right? So basically Indiana Jones is a double PhD by day, and like a Navy SEAL on the evenings and weekends for fun, right? Yeah. And I think the journey of truth and mastery for entrepreneurs is like building a toolkit like Indiana Jones has, so that we can go to ever more interesting, challenging, the Temple of Doom or the Lost Ark or the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull or whatever. And I think that getting an assistant is not about getting an assistant. I don't think that it's about even getting our time back. I think it's about freeing us up to fulfill our greatest potential. It makes a ton of sense for Indiana Jones to take the first voyage to the Temple of Doom, if you will, because it requires Indiana Jones level skill and experience and knowledge to demystify the biblical riddles and to speak the languages, the ancient languages that are like scribed on the walls and hieroglyphs, and to evade the booby traps and on and on. Like that's tough. You want to talk about VUCA. I mean, that's DVUCA. It's dangerous and it's volatile and uncertain and confusing and ambiguous. It's like even worse than VUCA, to again tie back to the start of our conversation. But it takes that. It is so dangerous. It's so all the rest. It takes someone who's a top 0.01% person to be able to go on that voyage. Here's the thing though, Nikki. Once he's gotten there the first time, he's triggered all the booby traps, he's figured out all the riddles, he solved all the puzzles, he can send a flare up and a GPS pin back to base camp. Say, this is where it is. I zigzagged all over the mountainside and through the jungle, but as the bird flies, you could save 3 days of walking if you just go this way. And then he can also report back and say, no need to carry a gun. There were no tigers, there were just some snakes. Make sure you bring the machete to defend yourself. We don't need the weight of 5 days of water. It's a 3-day voyage. I wore ankle-high boots. You need the whole knee-highs because of the bugs and all. So he can talk to the resources and the vision and what is required to succeed. Once he does that, do we need Indiana Jones to go back a second time? No. We would only need like an archaeologist with like 10 years worth of experience. But then after that, once that archaeologist goes on that voyage 2, 3, 4 times, we don't even need their level of skill and experience. We can take a grad student. And Nikki, before we know it, there's a 2-lane paved highway up to the Temple of Doom with a visitor center. And it's a 19-year-old kid selling a keychain saying, I survived the Temple of Doom, because all of the variability and all the VUCA, the variability, uncertainty, ambiguity, all the rest has been removed by the experts who've gone before us, right? So what's painful for me to see is when I see entrepreneurs who have Indiana Jones level skills, or maybe on their way to having Indiana Jones level skills, but they're stuck in their inbox and they're stuck sending invoices and they're stuck uploading files. They're doing visitor center level tasks with the toolkit that is Indiana Jones level. And so to me, it's about how do we continually define what needs to be done, design how to get it done, and delegate it. And to your point, the fastest, easiest, most affordable way to go about doing that is admin and ops type stuff to an assistant first. After we do that, maybe we graduate up to like production type people, who have more expertise, more experience, more specialty. I want to begin with an assistant who is not narrow and deep. I don't need them to know all of QuickBooks or all of WordPress or all of Asana or something like that. No. In fact, I probably don't even need them to know those tech tools at all. They can learn the first 5% of all that. What I need is a mini-me. I need a mini-me who's going to move back and forth in my business, from marketing to sales to finance to legal, back and forth in my business, who can take the bottom 5, 10% of anything that I touch, maybe even in my personal life. And my assistant does help me in my personal life too. So that it frees me up to go Indiana Jones more and more and more, just whatever the next adventure, personal, professional, whatever it is. And the speed at which I can define, design, delegate is the speed with which I'm able to fulfill my potential in this lifetime. So I think that that's the approach part one. Part two, I got to have an assistant and down the road other teammates who want to be with me long term. If it's a few hours a week, it's a freelancer, they've got 10 clients, something like that, we never get the momentum. And we also never, over the medium and long term, get the compound interest. My first assistant, something I realized very quickly was something called task stacking. I found 2, 3, 4 tasks that were all related. I taught her each of those tasks, and then I could kind of put a circle around all of them. So for example, event planning. If I said, hey, I want to do an event, maybe it's a Zoom webinar. Well, okay, we got to create the opt-in page. We got to create the actual Zoom invite. We got to email. There's all these individual tasks. Once I can figure out those 4 or 5 tasks that all have to happen, I teach all of them to my assistant. Now I can just say, hey, can you plan a webinar on this day at this time? And now my assistant can run the whole thing. And pretty soon an assistant goes from tasks to projects to areas of the business. And it's remarkable how fast they go up. So if I'm an entrepreneur, I'm thinking about that as my second thing is, how can I get a long-term assistant who wants to grow with me? And along those lines, I would be hiring through this one question. If I was legally bound to being with my next assistant for 3 years, how would I go about doing that? My answer for me was, I'm going to hire similar, same time zone, language, and business culture for a lot of reasons. It really cuts out mistakes. It cuts out errors. It cuts out issues with technology. It also cuts out any issues like if I ever did have to legally go after an assistant because I did give them my inbox and something inappropriate happened. I don't know how to navigate the Pakistani or Filipino or Venezuelan, government, but I definitely can pursue someone in the United States or Canada. Now, thankfully, I've never had to do that. I hope I never have to do that. But if I'm delegating things in my email inbox in very sensitive areas, I got to have that risk management in my mind. I could go on and on. That's just one example of if I optimize for long term, how would I go about doing that? Now, the last, third, and final part I'll share, something that was a little painful for me to realize was, yes, in my first 5 failed hires, I failed at getting the kind of assistant that would optimize for long-term success. Yes, there was an issue with who I was hiring. But Nikki, I also realized that even if I got a great assistant, they would probably leave within 90 days because I was not a great leader. I was skipping meetings. I was not responsive to their messages. I was unwilling to coach them. I was unwilling to train them. I didn't have an onboarding process. You could have brought me Warren Buffett's assistant, and they would have come in and been like, wow, this is a dumpster fire. I am out of here. I don't know Warren's assistant per se, so maybe she or he would have stayed, but you can see where I'm going with this. And so what I realized is if I've got a great assistant, but I'm a weak leader, that's like hopping on one leg, slow, tiring, awkward. The opposite is also true. If I'm a great leader, but I got a weak assistant, I'm just hopping on the other leg. So what I need both legs moving in concert. And that's what allows me to walk, run, maybe run a marathon. That's what creates the freedom. So I think that an entrepreneur needs to consider both parts, great leadership and getting a great assistant. And that's why we created not only in my company, which is called Great Assistant, people can check it out at greatassistant.com. We offer both parts. We help entrepreneurs get entrepreneurs in the US and Canada to get a US or Canadian based executive assistant, part-time or full-time. The going rate at the time of this recording is $22 to $25 US per hour. You're going to want to hire for at least 15 hours per week. We can't get good enough talent fast enough if we advertise for anything less than that. So there's just some kind of like from the front lines of the market kind of benchmarks to look for. And not only do we help you get that kind of assistant who's long-term minded and wants to be a career assistant, we also help train you, the entrepreneur, on how to build a great onboarding process, what to delegate, how to do an interview guide, what tech stack you should do, all of that. And so our program is at this point in time about a 7 to 8 week process from the time an entrepreneur signs up until the time they get their assistant. And over those exact same 7 to 8 weeks, we have a client success coach who works directly with the entrepreneur to make sure that everything is required and clicked into place so that they're ready as a leader by the time their assistant gets hired. It's a really, really beautiful process. The last thing I'll say for those who've failed before with getting an assistant, first of all, I don't blame you. I failed 5 times. And it's absolutely worth it to crack this code, because what you're unlocking is not just sending invoices or uploading podcast episodes or anything on the surface like that. You're actually unlocking your own potential. And that to me is the deepest reason why I'd want to get an assistant, is that I can go in Indiana Jones and make my highest contribution.
Tim, this has been a fascinating, unusual conversation. I really enjoyed it. You've given me a lot of food for thought around the assistant conversation. I'm definitely going to think on that. And listener, Tim is the real deal. He's a thoughtful man, and he knows what he's talking about. And if this is something you're considering for yourself, reach out to him. Go to greatassistance.com and make sure that you share this episode with someone else in your world who needs all parts of this conversation in their life today. God bless you, brother. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Thank you for the privilege and honor.
And that wraps up another exciting episode of the podcast, The Thought Leader Revolution. To find out more about today's amazing guest, the one and only Tim Francis, go to the show notes at thethoughtleaderrevolution.com or wherever you happen to listen to this episode, be it iTunes, Spotify, Google Play, YouTube, Rumble, Audible, or what have you. Until next time, goodbye.
This episode has been brought to you by eCircleAcademy.com, the proven system to add 6 to 7 figures a year to your thought leader practice.